Let's start this episode with the two-pronged question, or two overlapping questions, or something like that. What makes kids bad, and what makes bad kids? So, what makes kids bad? What I mean by that is, how do you define a kid as bad? What are the qualities that make a person, or specifically a kid, bad? What do we mean by bad? Is bad gone wrong, rotten? Is it someone who's failing at, say, their grades, failing to be social? Or is it someone who's actively being destructive and hurting others? So just exactly how do we define bad? And what is it to be bad? Is it something that you fall into, something you grow out of? Is a bad kid inherently different from a bad adult, or are they just the same things at different ages? Endless questions there. And then secondly, what makes kids bad? Or what make I'm forgetting which word order I used first time around. But the other question I want to ask is more like what conditions or what treatment or what exposure to what events can make a kid grow up to be like a problem, troublesome? Is it their family life? Is it poverty? Is it being overindulged? Is it being subjected to too much stress? Is it abandonment? You know, there's infinite well, there's maybe not infinite, but there's an awful lot of ways to approach these questions and an awful lot of ways to answer these questions. The book that we're looking at for this episode is called Bad Kids. That's its name in translation. Its name in Chinese, huài, háizi, basically the same. In fact, exactly the same? I suppose that's a philosophical question. But in any case, Bad Kids by Zijin Chen is the book, and the guest is Zijin Chen's translator, I think. For both of the two books of his you can get in English. Michelle Deeter, returning to the show yet again, I'm very happy to say. Of course, before we get to that interview, we're going to go to the Trucific News, the translated Chinese fiction news. So let's go. Okay, 3 news items. Let's see how quickly, or how efficiently rather, I can zip through them. The first is something you can read. This is an article on a book that has gone up to the China Project. I believe this used to be called Sup China. It's now the China Project. The article is by Jonathan Chatwin. I believe is he an academic or a sinologist or something? He's got, I think, had at least one podcast on something to do with China. He's got a book, I believe, as well. So yeah, this is a name I recognize. That's all I'm saying. So he's written this piece about The Sacred Clan by Liang Hong. It's called The Sacred Clan. Liang Hong turns to fiction to explore rural China. The little lead-in after that says, realism and the supernatural mixed in Liang Hong's The Sacred Clan, a collection of short stories that continues the author's lifelong work of capturing rural China. Liang Hong had a book that came out that was translated called China in One Village, I believe. Yeah, it's right there in the article. I didn't have to go by memory. But that was sort of a chronicle of everyday life in this village somewhere in Henan. I'm seeing. I'm trying to remember everything by memory, and then I look at the screen and it's right there. So yeah, so books you can get by Liang Hong in English now number at 2. First was China in One Village, a non-fiction, and now we have the fiction, The Sacred Clan. It's published by none other than Sinuist Books, friends of the pod, so do check that out. Check out the article, and if the article's grabbing you, go investigate the book. Okay, second news item. This might be one for you if you've ever eaten bugs. I've eaten bugs twice. Once in Dexing County, where I lived my first year in China, and then again during my time living in China, but on a holiday. I believe this was in Busan in South Korea. They had, I think it was the same dish in both instances. It was the cocoons, I believe, and not the actual bug. I'm not sure, but of silkworms, that dish. And that was actually in a Japanese restaurant, I think, like a Japanese skewer restaurant in Busan. Didn't really like them very much. But anyway, the reason I'm going on about bugs is because as part of a series of translations called Food Glorious Food, Paper Republic have published a translation of a story called The Bug Princess by Yang Shuangzi, translated by Francesca Jordan, whose I believe, had been doing academic work on the writing of Yang Shuangzi, who is a fascinating author. So I have not read this story, but what I can say is that what I've learned about Yang Shuangzi by listening to Francesca Jordan speak at the Taiwan lit event I went to, the Leeds Center for New Chinese Writing, where she introduced us to Yang Shuangzi and explained that she's still writing today, so born 1984. That makes her 9 years older than me. And she writes historical fiction in a, I think it's similar to whatever the Japanese name is for like a girl's love story. If you're a big manga head, you'll know this. I don't. But I guess they're also known as lily fiction. So she writes like a very literary, I guess, version of these gentle, like, girl love stories. I'm not sure where The Bug Princess fits into that, but I think, as far as I'm aware, this is the first translation of Yang Shuangzi published that I've seen. Just sounds so different, so out there. Why not check it out? It's up to read on the Paper Republic for free. Link is in the show notes. Okay, and last thing, this is incredibly brief because this is, to be honest, this was me being lazy. I searched Twitter for Chinese literature and I got a result from the 11th of July this year, shared by, I guess, the Hangzhou Tourist Board. Its profile picture is just the logo that Hangzhou has for Hangzhou City. I used to see it riding the bus from Deching into Hangzhou. Oh, that's nostalgic to think about. Anyway, according to Hangzhou Feel, this Hangzhou City Twitter account, which must be run with a VPN, I suppose, there is an exhibition about the poet or the literary figure Su Shi, which is running at the Westlake Museum in Hangzhou. According to Hangzhou Feel, the exhibit showcases 252 cultural relics from 17 cultural institutions, and they've put hashtag What's on Hangzhou, which I'm going to have to investigate that hashtag. Is anyone actually posting on that apart from Hangzhou Feel? No, there is one other person using the hashtag. Okay, I'll leave that one for you listeners to check out. But yeah, if you're in Hangzhou or if you're in China's Jiangnan region and Su Shi, or just anything about a literary figure appeals to you, maybe you'll be into this. It looks very pretty. They've got some photos from the museum. They've certainly made an effort with the lighting and the colours and whatnot. So perhaps that will be nice. Perhaps that'll be worth a visit for you. Well, that's all the news items. I'll round off the Church of Vic news there. Now we must march forward to meet the bad kids in conversation with Michelle Deeter. This was a fun one. Enjoy. And I hope that by the end of the interview, you'll be convinced to go check out the book. I thought it was really quite both a very good read and pretty unique out of stuff I've read for the pod. Quite dark. Although the question of how dark it is will come up in this interview. So see what you make of that. And if you do read the book, then see what you make of the book. Okay, enough for me. On with the interview. So back on the show yet again, we have friend of the pod, Michelle Deeter. Michelle, fantastic to have you back. What have you been up to since you were last here?
Well, a little bit of this and a little bit of that, I suppose. I gave a webinar on museum translation, which was super fun. Gave an online course on specialized translation, like covered legal and scientific, environmental. It's really cool. I started teaching 50% at Newcastle University. So you probably knew that I was teaching there before, but now it's it's a big part of my income, and I have students that I'm taking care of. I have little tutees and things. So that has become more interesting, more of a responsibility as well. And I qualified as a public service interpreter, so I'm going to court a lot. I was actually in court today.
Oh.
Interpreting for clients, criminal or family or business type stuff, all that. Unfortunately, all this other new stuff I'm doing means I'm not doing as much literary translation at the moment. I had one short story since I last spoke to you, and a sample translation that I did. And I'm not sure if that book is going anywhere. So, yeah.
Well, fingers crossed for it.
Yeah.
I hope the right person sees it. I can relate with cutting down on the higher things just out of being busy. That's real in my world. I don't know if I've said on this show before, but listeners may want to know I got myself a dog. So dog is now number one. After the job, dog is now number one competitor for the podcast. But enough about me. I thought we could march forward to discuss the book. Listeners, if you want to know more about Michelle, just go to the website, the podcast homepage, trchfic.com, type the word Michelle into the search bar, and I think there's 3 episodes with you on them. I think this is number 4, which does make
this is an honor. Yes.
Yeah, that means you definitively overtaken Nikki Harmon, I think, for most repeat appearances.
Maybe.
I
think
think
once
she's
you
on
mentioned
3.
me in show notes, and so it comes up in a search, but it's not
Oh
actually
yeah,
me as the guest.
yeah,
So
yeah, that's true. Yes, very true.
awesome.
Anyway, our our book is Bad Kids, Huài, háizi. So, Michelle, who are these kids and why are they bad?
Yeah, so it centers around 3 kids, and the one kid, Zhu Chaoyang, is kind of a straight A student, kind of always follows the rules, and is the one that would probably be so good that he gets bullied all the time. That he gradually transforms into someone calculating and someone mistrustful of everyone. And kind of his transformation was the main reason why I agreed to translate this book. I think it's really fun to watch him go from good scaredy cat kid into just something almost unrecognizable. He turns into a very bad kid. The other 2 bad kids are kind of like bad by association, I suppose. So Ding Hao is 13 and he lands in an orphanage. And so sometimes, has to do things that are socially not so good, like steal a man's wallet so that he has money to run away from the orphanage. And Poo Poo is kind of malevolent. She's I don't know if you call her chaotic evil or what, but she certainly believes that if Chaoyang is bullied by someone, that person should get, I don't know, attacked, should get in trouble for that. So she's most definitely a bad kid. She's not just bad by association. The television show is sometimes translated into Hidden Corner, right? So the book came out first in Chinese, and then there was a Chinese television show. And when they picked up the book to translate into English, they thought about making it Hidden Corner. And I'm just like, what? Fortunately, I got to change it to Bad Kids, although it does make me think of the song Bad Boys, What You Gonna Do? And so I'm torn about the title that I fought for.
Hidden Corner. What does that refer to?
Exactly, Angus. I've read this book at least 3 times. I don't know.
There's no corners, folks.
I mean, please write in, let us know what you think the Hidden Corner refers to.
And I guess it's worth saying, I said it earlier, but as I understood it, Bad Kids is basically just a literal translation of the book's title, right? Just Why Hides the Bad Kids. I had seen news about the book getting adapted into a TV show, and I'd seen its English name is also a literal translation, but it's The Bad Kids.
Yeah, and I don't know how they came up with that either. But for me, that Bad Kids, maybe because it's like 2 short syllables and they both end in D or something about that to me sounds like a title.
7 letters.
Yeah, short is good, right?
It's very snappy indeed. Yeah. A book cover designer's dream come true, I think, because you can make it huge.
Right. Yeah, the rest of the cover design is predictably red and therefore disappointing, but the way the Bad and Kids spreads out at the top and is super recognizable, that is good.
Do you mean disappointing in the sense that it's a book set in China and they made it red, or?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Never
mind. It happens. I hadn't
thought about that, but I really love the color red, so I have a blind spot, I suppose.
Wait till you have a shelf of red because you buy so many books in translation.
Well, I have all my translated Chinese books on a shelf. It's not too red, but I don't know. Maybe that's down to the sort of books I'm getting. A lot of them.
The other thing is that it happens more in nonfiction compared to fiction.
It gets into like farce in a commercial bookshop in the, I don't know what you call it, the genre of book of someone funded by an American think tank writing a large red China is scary book.
Yes, I know what you mean.
Yeah, it's a genre. So we've introduced the bad kids and why they're bad. Would you say this is not a question I prepared you for, but would you say this is a crime fiction? And if so, is it standard fare or is it something a bit different?
Definitely, it's crime fiction. We've got some crimes happening, and the crimes are solved at the end to a kind of satisfactory conclusion. Personally, I really enjoy crime fiction that takes place close to modern day and where the characters kind of live a life that's similar enough to mine. You know, when they're decades and decades away. Like I just finished a book that is supposed to take place in Imperial China. And, you know, somebody is posing as a eunuch. One of the main characters is,
Classic move.
yeah, to get in the palace. Like for me, that's not classic fare anymore. That's something that's got the layer of historical fiction on top of it. So for me, if it takes place in a city and we've got that pacey, short chapters going on, then that hits the sweet spot. And for me, that's just catnip. It's perfect.
Although it is, yeah, like you said, it's a sort of urban setting, but mountains come in, and I'm going to introduce the mountains by reading the blurb, a
Sure.
classic Angus move. One beautiful morning, Zhang Dongshun Sheng pushes his wealthy in-laws off a remote mountain. It's the perfect crime, or so he thinks, for Zhang did not expect that teenager Chao Yang and his friends would catch him in the act. An opportunity for blackmail presents itself, and the kids start down a dark path that will lead to the unraveling of all their lives. Dark, heart-stopping, and violent, Bad Kids is the suspense thriller that has taken China by storm, proving that anyone has what it takes to become a killer. So that's the basic premise, I guess, that the kids spot a killer and decide to use it. What the blurb maybe didn't tell us, because blurbs have limited word counts, is that the two kids you mentioned, Ding Hao and Pu Pu, they're orphans on the run, and I don't think I'm misrepresenting it. The blackmail is essentially a way to get them money so that they can exist because they don't have parents to look after them, and the social services system, to understatement of the century, it wasn't serving them very well. It wasn't.
Let them down. Yeah.
Yes, let them down just a little bit, a teeny bit.
Mm.
Yeah. Is there anything else you'd want to describe about the plot or the premise, or do you think that's sort of enough to start with?
Well, you mentioned how, you know, family plays a bigger role in China than it does in other countries, even though people from all around the world would say family is important. So I think
Although I would say I wouldn't want to claim
be
China
in
is
their
the number.
family.
I was
Oh,
going to
okay.
say I wouldn't want to say China is the best, has the highest score on the family meter out of all 200 countries, but it must be fairly high.
I think it's an interesting dynamic to see how a strong family leads kids to act in one way, whereas a broken family or apparently being raised by a single mother can lead you to have these insecurities and to be distrusting of others and just can lead to all sorts of problems. So part of the reason why Ding Hao and Pu Pu have so many problems is because they have no parents and their aunts and uncles refuse to do anything for them. And definitely part of the reason why Chao Yang gets into more and more trouble is because nobody's supervising him and noticing that he's changing or noticing that these kids are a little bit weird that he's suddenly hanging out with. But also just the whole dynamics, the idea that a step family could be estranged from each other for so long is like a key part of how Chao Yang changes and why he does some of the things he does. But I still find it believable. You know, some of the books that Zijin Chen writes are a little bit suspension of disbelief every other chapter. And that's okay, right? Like there's lots of movies out there that require a huge suspension of disbelief at one point or another. But the reason why I think this is my favorite book that Zijin Chen has written, or at least that I know of, is because I find that the characters do things that I could imagine them doing, even if they are a little bit extreme. It's like, well, you did have the motivation to take that final step.
Yeah, it's heightened, but as far as the characters' actions go, it all makes sense emotionally for sure. I think what you were saying about Chao Yang and how he's not supervised points to another issue besides just the fact he's got a single mother. And there's a psychological issue where um, his dad is doing all sorts of awful things that
Yeah.
doing bad things for his mental health. But another issue is his mum, her only job is she's up on that mountain as a ticket vendor.
Yep.
So, I mean, I was not for a very large window of time, but for a while, I was the child of a single mother. But me and my sibling were going to an after school club, or we had
Yeah.
friends, we could go to friends' houses or my mum's friends' houses. So there were things to fill in the gap there that would mean we wouldn't be at home for hours on end. I guess the two things that Chow Young's mum is lacking in the story, which are socially believable, are money to pay for a child sitter. I also don't know how normalized child sitting is in China. Maybe it's more about having a grandparent or a friend in your
Hmm.
social network to handle that, or a
Yeah.
nanny if you're very rich. But that the nanny is the ai is off the table. But yeah, she just doesn't. She's all on her own, and I think part of the reason there is she's been unfairly kicked out of her marriage by Chow Young's father, who's he's a factory owner per se, but he's like a big boss of a seafood business.
Packaging plant, some kind of
Yeah,
business. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So there's an inequality angle there as well. I think you see all sorts of economics or
Yeah, you do.
pressures around money creeping into the story. I quite enjoyed that.
Yeah, and it's again, it's believable that Chaoyang would be worried about every single $100 bill, and so would Ding Hao. Like they're going to be super, super sensitive to money. And then at the same time, like the way Wang Yao just, doesn't want to use a camera because it doesn't hold its charge anymore. It's just like, yep, those are her first world problems, so to speak. Like those, that's the level that she's operating at. Yeah. So family is a key like dimension where you can kind of dissect or look at this novel, but then economic pressure is another really interesting way to look at the novel. Bullying as well, but I think that's more just for looking at Chaoyang rather than looking at all the different characters and how those characters relate to each other.
Yeah, I was going to say when you said about the characters react to money, if you're a reader who likes a novel with a bit of hard cash in it, it's a very cash economy book. It's definitely you can the book doesn't shove it in your face, but it you can tell it's sort of pre-smartphone for two reasons.
Mm,
One, I think, is that no one's using what is it, Saoi Sao on Weixin or Zhifubao. No one's scanning QR codes to pay for stuff.
yeah.
And a camera is really, really central to the drama. I don't know if that was in the I guess it wasn't in the blurb, but they've got the basically they have the murder captured on camera in the background of a like a what would you call it, an early 21st century selfie with their video camera.
Yeah, they just do, a fun little video of themselves. Although it's not a selfie, right? I think
Or someone's filming
Chao
someone
Yang
else.
is filming and Ding
Right.
Hao and Poo Poo are on camera, or just Ding Hao is on camera.
I know
Uh,
some Philistines that would call that a selfie, which is very
ah.
depressing. But anyway, sorry.
Anyways, yeah, so that camera is important. I feel like for his purposes, it's kind of important that these kids don't have cameras. So he
Yeah.
did just set it far enough back that that wouldn't be an issue. But still, their day to day is so similar to today's China that I think everything still works just fine.
Yeah, I remember previously doing crime fiction on the show. I think it was ooh, that's bad. I don't remember the name. It's that one that is in the translation, it's set in Chengdu, but the actual book is somewhere in Jiangsu. In any case, at least once on the show, the author set it like in the 90s or the early 2000s before smartphones. And I don't know if that's a move crime fiction writers in China make, or if that's just a thing all crime fiction writers do for very obvious reasons, and that the
Yeah.
smartphone makes everything much more complicated and potentially, everything can get solved much faster. Or you could maybe even you could say that once the smartphone is in a story, it's going to become a smartphone crime story inevitably. There, you just it's unrealistic to scrub them out.
Well, it's like the surveillance. The surveillance cameras are so important, but
Yeah.
not necessarily outside of China, I suppose. It's only China and the UK that have surveillance cameras like in all
Yeah.
big cities in every corner.
Yeah, I'm living inside a house that came with cameras.
Yeah, so there you go. If you write a crime story, I have to take place outside.
And maybe I'm oversharing, but the cameras in this house have already caught two different groups of bad kids doing,
No
I
way.
think, illegal stuff. Um, there's a little sandwich shop over the road, and some kids smashed their, was it their glass or like some hard plastic? They smashed stuff with a football,
Oh.
and we're pals with the owner, and yeah, through the magic of a local Facebook group, we were able to use that footage to, I think, I think it ended up with the police. I don't know if the naughty kids were brought to justice, but then another time, some genius boy, egged on by some girls, decided to just boot our front door right underneath the camera.
Oh, how
And
strange.
yeah, and his parents did send him to apologize. So
That's something. Yeah, because I'm sure the door is kind of okay, but still
the door's fine,
flirty.
but if it got kicked like that every day, it wouldn't be.
No, that too. Yeah, yeah. Oh
Yeah,
gosh.
pretty nuts. I'll take us to the next question. I think we've sort of, for readers who hadn't heard of Bad Kids before, hopefully they get it now. Really astute listeners of this show who've been with us for years now will
Mhm.
remember that your first time you came on the show, we did another book by Zijin Chen. We did The Untouched Crime. So how similar is this is Bad Kids to the Untouched Crime?
So I think both stories happen in the same universe. We have the detective Yan Liang, who is trying to solve the crime in the untouched crime, but is also asked to look into some of the murders in Bad Kids. And then I'm pretty sure that the forensic doctor, Chen, can't remember his first name, Dr. Chen anyway, is also in both stories. But since he's fairly minor, that's not as noticeable. The Untouched Crime was definitely written earlier, and so it has more of a web feel and more of a, like catering to the audience a little bit, making certain kinds of jokes that he thinks his readers will love.
Like web fiction, you mean?
Thank you. Yes.
Posted chapter by chapter on like a forum or a website or something.
It was serialized, and we didn't make any bigger changes to try and, I don't know, erase that or adapt that. Whereas this story, I think he does a better job just kind of plotting and making the pieces fit together really well. But also, I was given a little bit more license to make the book pacier. So at some point, I can pull back the curtain a little bit and tell you about how we made the book pacier and just that little bit more like a crime fiction novel that someone would want to pick up and then finish the same day.
I think when it mentioned there was a detective at, I forget if they called it Zhejiang University or Hangzhou University or something, I was like, oh, that sounds like the same one he used for Untouched Crime. Maybe it's the same guy. Maybe I'll look that up. I did not look it up, but
It's the same guy. Now
I'm
you know.
glad you could confirm that. It's funny because he's not in like every, what can I say? He pops up now and then, but he's not a front runner at all. So that's kind
He's
of
not
fun.
central. Yeah, yeah, yeah. He's not central in this one.
Nice part of the Zijin Chen extended universe.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's much more we can do to sort of pick it what's similar or different about the books. But I did want to ask you, to you, did Bad Kids seem unusually heavy or dark or socially conscious for a novel from the PRC? We already mentioned how it gets into social issues around like families, broken families, unconventional families, money inequality. I thought that felt fairly real, but it gets quite dark as well. So just I don't know what's your thoughts on that?
I mean, I guess I would have to say for the socially conscious part, I would say yes. It's touching upon issues that are really a big deal in China and are something that certainly readers in China, but probably readers elsewhere would really understand and be like, oh, yeah, that is an issue. Dark, I mean, technically, but I guess like I'm so close to the book that I forget how dark it is. And I remember telling the editor how many murders there were. I'm not going to mention it on the show, but she's like, "Really? That many?" And I was like, yeah, I just recounted. It's definitely that many." So on that level, it is dark. However, I'm currently reading a translated crime fiction again from Chinese into English, and two people are skinned and their flesh is fried. Yeah. So that's a lot heavier to me. Like it's just there's so much more gruesome and ghastly stuff
Mm,
happening. Whereas this one, it's like, oh, the person is dead, but more in an Agatha Christie kind of way.
right. Yes, it's not gory. I think that's fair to
Yeah.
say.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I guess it really depends on the adjective you choose. So it's certainly more socially conscious than some of the stuff that I've been reading, kind of more touching on the issues. But I've definitely seen just gross and dark done to a more crazy extent, I guess.
Yeah, I guess this when I was thinking of dark, I was more thinking of the situations the kids get put in, and indeed the things the kids, some of the kids end up doing. I'll
Mm.
stray away from spoilers since I guess you want people to buy the book. But and you said that Chao Yang goes down a dark path. He sure does. By the end of the book, I was like, am I reading what I think I'm reading? The
How? Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah. But yeah, also things that you learn happened to probably by me using this phrasing, people will get what I'm indicating, but again, no spoilers. But things that you learn happened to Jing Hao and especially Pupu in the orphanage. I was like, damn, this is it challenged me a bit because in my mind I thought, oh, crime fiction, this is a sort of breezy genre fiction read. I
Mm.
don't have to take it too seriously, but I feel like it gets into topics that you shouldn't just sort of breeze through. And then I felt at the end when you get the
Yeah.
dark Xiaoyang, like on one hand it was giving me like the oh yeah, this is twisted crime fiction. This is the
Yes.
evolution of a character in an entertaining way. But then the other part of me was like, oh my God, this is so sad.
Yeah,
This
it's
is
true.
yeah.
Buckle
So
up, people. Buckle up.
mm, mm, yeah. And I suppose whether or not how it compares to as how it stands as a novel from the PRC. Well, I've read a lot, but I can't. I feel like I can't say what is standard level of social consciousness for a novel from modern China, especially since I think the stuff that makes it to translation is often the stuff that gets picked because it has some kind of a social element that's interesting or considered
That's
to be worthy. So
hard to say. Hard to
yeah.
say.
Yeah. Okay. More about the story. What aspects of it stand out to you? And it could be technical stuff like, say, character development, motivations, or just stuff that you thought was special or novel that you hadn't seen it before, or you thought was really well done. Just anything like that.
I think, again, it fits in a style that I really enjoy. So the fact that it's kind of a real world, it's still taking place in a real city, rather than a city that we won't tell the exact name or will
Yeah.
hide certain characteristics to make sure we don't get in trouble. I enjoy that it's still really precise like that. And character development is probably my favorite thing about this story. So with the Untouched Crime, we have a main character who's a forensic scientist, and he has a daughter and a wife who are so flat, it's not even funny. Like they're just totally adorable and passive. And they have like very minimal conversations. They're not interesting and they happen to be female. Whereas in this book, we've got Poo Poo, who is amazing. And then we have Ye Chiming, who is the bully of Zhu Chaoyang and who is trying to do better in school, but is not number one. And therefore, she gets told off by her dad. So she's got all these motivations to try and make Chaoyang fail at his exams. Right. So she's just got really interesting character development. Feng Li Na is sweet. Generally, she's the one person who is Chaoyang's friend at school right now. But she's not just pure sweet, right? She's a little bit dumb and she likes to read her favorite novels instead of actually looking at her textbook and stuff. It's delicious the way so much is going on. I remember the editor wanted to change a little something about Zhou Chunhong. There was like he's probably giving her short shrift, right? He describes her as overweight, and sometimes she reacts in a way that's just a little bit over the top. But I said I enjoyed the fact that this is a mother that's not just painted as Oh, she's a saint and she does
Saint
everything
or a sinner.
correctly.
Yeah.
Correct. She is someone who's trying her hardest, and she really believes in her son. This is her only child. And she's probably really bitter from the marriage, and she should be. Like the way she was left and the fact that she's not getting any money and whatever, like absolutely. The fact that she doesn't seem to have a support network would kind of probably make you bitter. So I said, no, I don't want to change too much about Zhou Chunhong. I think she's um, a believable character and three-dimensional, even if we don't seem to like the way she acts.
Yeah, she's a real grounding force in the novel, and maybe the
Yeah,
fact she's not can't be there all the time to ground Choyang is part of the tragedy.
exactly. For me, it all fits. If there was somebody there, then someone should have stopped these kids way earlier on. But there
Yeah.
was nobody there, and they kind of feed off of each other. They give each other more bad suggestions and bad ideas.
Mm.
So that's for me, it's the motivation and the character development that made the story work, that made me like excited to see what happened next. Yeah, otherwise, I don't know. I think it struck that balance pretty well of having some Chinese elements, but not being so weird or exotic that people can't relate unless they've lived in China themselves.
Yeah, there's specificity for sure. I've got something I want to mention about that before, but before I do, when you were talking about the different female characters and you started with all the mean ones, it struck me that in this book, and maybe also in The Untouched Crime, you
Mhm.
could sort of do a chart that tracks characters' intelligence with how mean
Evil
or
they are.
evil they are. Yeah, because maybe there's I can think of a couple of exceptions. Zhou
Yeah.
Chunhong is clearly quite smart, but is nice, and her ex-husband is a bit of a piece of work for the most part, but not that smart.
Yeah.
But
He's easily persuaded. I
yeah,
can't tell how smart he is. I think he's just influenced by others.
yeah. But then
Yeah.
just about everyone else, maybe they start off good, but if they're smart, the intelligence doesn't tend to be used for good ends, and by the
Mm,
end,
yeah.
sharp like a knife.
I mean, and I guess that is the kind of pessimistic dark side of Zijin Chen, kind of showing us that, we are selfish and we are likely to make decisions kind of for the short term or for ourselves rather than thinking about what others might need or might want. Yeah.
I've never done any of those things. Don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, so you said about the setting being somewhat specific to China, but not in like a completely unrelatable way for your average Westerner. I thought one thing that was it's somewhere I've never actually set foot in living in China because I had no reason to, but it struck me as well, maybe it's not specifically Chinese, I don't know. Maybe other countries have these, but one or two very important scenes happen in a children's palace, which
Yeah.
like I said, I lived in China for years, but never went into one because I
A
wasn't
child
raising
in
children,
China.
wasn't a child either.
Yeah.
Um, but as far as I'm aware, I don't know. I don't know if children's palaces are a sort of a relic from an older China and whether that's an 80s like proto-consumerist China or if in the Mao era this was a sort of a utopian idea for having a place for children. Do you know anything about them? Like when they
There's a
started or
full-on Wikipedia article, so I recommend it for anybody who's curious. Yep, yep.
right.
And it seems like it might have been a Soviet thing as well, if I remember correctly.
Oh, yeah.
So, get the children doing good, healthy things and get them smarter so that they can serve the country better type situation. But also it just sounds kind of cool. Like it has a museum, it has rides next to it, it has classes. It just sounds nice.
Yeah, I think any what am I trying to say? Any hard left vision for a country or for a world like a socialism or communism, if you don't have fun stuff or stuff that gets your imagination or for adults your libido going, what's the point? What's there to live for? So there's maybe something in that making a palace for children. It's just a case of what do you think is fun, you know? Is it textbooks or is it a
Yes.
roller coaster ride? What serves the country better?
I guess that's kind of where it's from. And to me, it sounded really fun. It's just that if you don't put money into it later, maybe it becomes derelict. That's all.
Yeah, it becomes like a shadow of its former self. And again, I've never, don't know if I've ever even seen one. So I don't know if they do tend to be a bit run down in China or not, or if their number is decreasing. And but yeah, it's an interesting sort of maybe runs against some ideas of like a stereotypical idea of what a Cold War communist country looks like, that they wouldn't invest resources into places like that. I suppose it comes down to what do you fill the palace with? What's your idea of what makes life worthwhile or fun for a kid? And indeed, what are you doing for them once they become adults? But it's sort of beside the point, I suppose.
Yeah, it's just it fit really well. So I'm glad he put it in there. I didn't know about them either. So that was a chance for me to learn more about a part of China's history that I didn't know.
Yeah, awesome. All right, my next question for you, it's a crucial one. Who's your favorite character?
This one's tricky. So I thought about saying Feng Li Na because again, she's sweet. She's someone who's willing to actually give Zhu Chaoyang a chance in class. But really, she's just using him so that she can copy his notes. So that's out. I would not want to be friends with somebody who just wants to take my notes. I think Ding Hao, even though he's blabbermouth and he's like going to get you in trouble, maybe, he means well and he's always smiling and joking around. So that's the one I'd want to hang out with. That's who I'm gonna pick. Yeah.
Yep. And don't worry, readers, it ends well for him. Everyone
Do
who's
you have a
nice,
favorite?
happy ending. I think I liked Chao Yang. I could relate a bit.
Okay.
And I think not just to like, I don't know, being a weird kid at school or having had a slightly unconventional family, but like the chip on your shoulder that can sort of give you, and how
Mm,
that can, it could motivate you to do good things, or it could sort of fester like a rotten seed. That's I could relate to that. I couldn't really relate to a kid who's been through the orphanage or has been living in dire poverty. That's luckily for me, that's never been me. So yeah, I think Chao Yang is the one that I mentally glommed onto. I did find the killer, that Zhang Dongsheng, the guy who pushed his in-laws off. Didn't relate to him, but he was an interesting character. The way he tries to manage the situation once he knows he's being blackmailed is very scary. Really,
mm.
really well written sort of fiend type character. You know, a guy who, what am I trying to say? Had he not been videotaped, might have just walked among us, so to speak,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
been undetectable as a, don't know, like a predator in society.
I enjoyed how he kind of swings back and forth. So his anger flashes or bubbles up, and then he remembers that he has a role to play. He needs to act a certain way in front of people. And so he reins in his emotions, where he's like, okay, now it's time to convince the police officers that I'm grieving. Now it's time to convince my former professor that I still want to stay with my wife. And I think that we have a chance. That part of it is really fun. But yeah, you're right that he's actually quite terrifying. He's not just emotional or something. He's plotting and
Yeah.
willing to do a lot to get to his goal. Yeah.
I mean, we all behave a little differently in different situations, but when someone, when the masks are more there than whatever is underneath them appears to be there, and what the thing underneath them is possibly just an even bigger chip on the shoulder, just pure rage. It's yeah, it's well written for a book that you can, you know, zip through quite quickly on a sunny day. Uh, I don't think I have any other characters I want to shout out, so I'll start interrogating you about translation instead. Uh,
Excellent.
so this is a nice softball that you can knock anywhere that you please. Did this book present any translation challenges? Spoilers, I heard Michelle speak at a Chinese literature retreat in Leeds. So I already know some of the answers to this question, and I know that they're interesting.
Well, hopefully I can even surprise you, but we'll see.
We'll see.
So like I mentioned a little earlier, I was invited to kind of edit to make the English version a little pacier. And I think I was comfortable because I knew the author's style pretty well already and had already translated maybe 4 or 5 books. So I knew what I could do and kind of what I liked to do. So we made some cuts, no huge cuts. So there's mention to a song that we cut out because I didn't think any of the English readers would know it. There was more romance between Pupu and Chaoyang. And I said, they have a pretty big age difference. Can we kind of tone that down? Got the okay with the author and the publishers, and that's what we did.
Yeah, because Pupu is the youngest of the trio.
Yes, she's only 11.
Right.
And so to have a crush is fine, but, I wanted to not go too far on that. And then Dream of the Red Chamber is mentioned, which I know you just talked about on the podcast. So everybody who's following the podcast would have gotten the reference, but I decided to cut it out in order to avoid a footnote. I know. That was a pretty big one. I know.
There's at least one listener.
He's like crying.
They were on the bus and the seat, and now they're on their knees in the aisle.
What have I done? I'm not spreading Chinese culture properly. I won't be allowed back. But then there's little things that, we maybe wanted to keep in, usually because they related very closely to plot. So Chaoyang's reading this book at the beginning, and it's like home remedies for your height or whatever. And it says in the book that carbonated beverages leach calcium. And I looked it up and I'm like, oh my God, no, that's not a thing. Carbonated beverages do not take calcium out of your bones. They do not make you shorter. But then I realized I could still see a book being published like that in China. And I could still see someone like Chaoyang like believing it and then deciding to act on it, like promising himself that he will never, never, never drink carbonated beverages again. And it does come up like 3 times later in the book. So taking that out would kind of mess up a lot of things. So I just changed it to, let me see if I can find it. It's just like we added 2 words.
While you're looking, I'll just say to anyone listening who's not got Chinese connections, never lived in China, you will, if you're living in China as a foreigner, you will get some amazing health advice. You will get amazing models to follow for staying fit, staying active. You will also get some rubbish.
Quackery.
Yes. Yeah. Well,
here we go.
I'm pro hot water, by the way.
Good. Excellent. Yeah. So Chaoyang had gone through the list and underlined the key points. The first thing he would do was stop drinking carbonated drinks because the book said they leach calcium from the bones. So we just added the words the book said, and I was like, now we can keep this. It's going to be absolutely fine.
That's really funny. Listeners won't see it, but I'm holding back a giggle.
And what else happened? Oh, yeah. I asked all of my Chinese friends, as many as I could think of, if there was a custom where people take photos and burn them so their dead ancestors can see them.
Oh, yeah.
And I was, researching about customs of the dead. I was going and going and going. That doesn't really seem to be a thing. But again, China is huge and diverse. So I could see either somewhere in China doing that or someone like Poo Poo coming fixated with the idea that she wants to stay connected to her dad. And so she's going to maybe, she's 11. She's going to maybe warp a few different customs and meld them together in a way that makes her feel like she's still talking to her dad. She's still letting her dad know that she's okay. So we didn't try and change that or, explain to the reader that most people don't do this. Poo Poo's just exasperated. She's like, duh, I have to take a picture of myself every year and burn it. Duh, Chaoyang. And she's 11. So, of course, any opinion she holds, she's just going to hold it like absolutely. And especially something that's so close to her, like, I love my dad, I care about my dad, and I want to be able to stick with him. So we just left that exactly as is.
I guess that's another sign that it's an older, or it's not that it's older, pardon me, that it's a sort of proto-digital story because people are still taking their photos to get printed. They're not just storing them digitally.
And assuming that the cloud is connected to heaven in some way. Yeah.
That's what I'm banking on. But
Yes, indeed. So for the most part, we made a lot of cuts so that it'd be shorter and punchier. But speaking of hot water, when when Poo and Chaoyang first go to Zhang Nongsheng's house, he offers them a carbonated beverage, and of course Chaoyang says, "No, I can't have any soda. No way." And so Zhang Dongsheng is a little bit exasperated. He's like, "Fine, I'll boil some water for you." And so in the Chinese original, Chaoyang just says, "Okay." And in the English, we added, like most Chinese, Chaoyang preferred his water warm rather than
yeah,
cold, in little parentheses. Because yeah, the editor kind of pointed it out, I think, that that was an odd way to end the conversation of what would you like to drink. Um, but yeah, like I
scalding
said,
hot water, please, in a glass.
it's a hot day. I would like hot water.
Yeah,
It's just these little minor things, and they all add up together to make the story super authentic. And hopefully it's just little trims, like you can see the original hairstyle. And so we're just getting that English version to be trimmed a little tiny bit so it has the exact same effect, but is maybe a little bit neater on certain parts.
fair enough. What about Blabbermouth? Do you want to
Oh,
say anything about
yes.
Blabbermouth?
Thank you. So every story that I've ever translated of Zijin Chen will come up with one really killer nickname, like really funny, but really hard to translate nickname. So for this book, it was Da Ba. It's mentioned like 5 or 6 times. It was important to the story. And Da means big and Ba means lips. So that could be lips that you put lipstick on or just lips for talking. So I thought about writing loose lips, thought about writing big lips. Loose lips sink ships, right? Like that's definitely a phrase. But I can't see someone calling a 13-year-old guy loose lips. So I sat on it and I sat on it
What
and I
about
sat on
Jimmy the
it.
Lip?
Ding Hao the lip. And then actually the same way that I fixed a similar problem before, I just read a lot of other good fiction, good stories, and came across a book entitled Blabbermouth.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh wait, that's it. That's my nickname. So I was happy when I finally found it. And for me, it feels like the right one. Maybe a different translator would choose something else entirely.
I think that's almost perfect because the word blabber has a little bit of onomatopoeia, like blabber, blah, 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 blah. It's like a
It's
lip-based word.
satisfying. Yes, it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it has the meaning, that meaning of like, oh, you spilled the beans again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
for listeners' enjoyment, I'll do that again. That'll sound good.
Excellent.
I know I have quite a monotone delivery, so I know moments like that are they're
Priceless.
premium. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my next question about the book from your perspective as the translator is, have you got reactions to it yet? Like, have you met people who've read it, or have you been looking out for the reviews of the English translation? Just how's that going?
It's a challenge. I find that a lot of translators finish the project and kind of walk away from it. It's people who would go on your show who might be the translators that actually stay connected with their book or think about promotion, think about how the book actually landed in the market. I was totally shocked and not ready for the book to be shortlisted on a crime fiction award for a crime fiction award. So I guess it's doing well. And if I remember correctly, Paul French recommended it, which
Oh yeah.
blew my mind. I've interpreted for him before. I find him to be very interesting and smart. Uh, but maybe I just made that up. Who knows? So it seems like it's doing fairly well, which is exciting because Zijin Chen has more out there. And when one of an author's books does well, that means there's a possibility for another book, definitely.
I think I know Paul French has I know they call them blurb quotes. I prefer to call them promo quotes, whatever. There's a Paul French quote on the back of a new Cineast Books book. So I wonder if he's dipping his toes a bit more away from his favorite colonial history into just translated books from China, or maybe just books from China and from the modern times, with no foreigners involved.
Well, he's
stepping out
trying
of
to
his
read
comfort
super
zone.
widely.
Mm.
I get a newsletter from the China Project.
Oh yeah.
And so every week he recommends a book on his China shelf. And I don't know if this is a digital or an actual real shelf that he has, but he's just recommending a different book that somehow is related to China every week of the year. So at that point, you can't just cover like one little tiny part of fiction or nonfiction. You really got to read all over the place so you can keep people interested, keep the newsletter segment going.
Tell me about it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, as the
But in
show
a good
goes on,
way.
it's like I will only read tiny novellas. I'm not gonna read a monster. I mean, that's not true.
Yeah, you
But
just read Dream of the Red Chambers.
I didn't. That was one of the like three things I read when I was living in China.
Oh, good point. Oh,
So
yeah.
if listeners were like, "Why is Angus's close reading missing?" from that's why. I also didn't remember which translation it was. I think it was the Jolly. I looked it up after, stupidly. I believe it was the Jolly translation, which is not. I don't think that's the favorite one. I think is it Howard Hawks is the favorite one.
I think my friend's advice was if you can get to a library, try to get 2 or 3 different copies
Mm,
and read the first chapter and see which one you like.
that's good advice.
He's a smart fellow too. Yeah. But we can't always, have access to a library that has multiple copies or even a bookstore that would have different translations for sale on the same like day. So,
Yeah.
well, maybe you can do more with, the Amazon look inside and stuff like that.
I am haunted by a version of Dream of the Red Chamber that I read about and could never find. When I was living in China, I was looking up lists of like different versions of the translations. In the end, I just, I switched on my VPN and just Googled Dream of the Red Chamber ebook or PDF and got this old out of copyright translation. So the point was moot. But when I was looking through lists, I'm sure I saw one that was like a sort of a translation, but also sort of a reinterpretation, or possibly it was a novel written in English, like a re-inspired. But
Adaptation type thing.
I don't remember exactly. But it was by I think it was by a woman in the Chinese diaspora, maybe Chinese American, who rewrote it to give more of a focus on the female characters, which is funny because it's quite female focused already, but it had some spin like that. And apparently it was very well written, but my Google searches have never found it again. It seems like I might have dreamed it.
Oh, I know the feeling. Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Yeah.
So if any listener knows what that is and can help me, please help.
Please.
Because that was bugging me a lot. I went down the rabbit hole again before that episode to no avail. Anywho, back to business. I think we can go to the miscellaneous section questions now. I always tell myself this is where we start to wind down, but when I'm editing the episodes, I'm like halfway through the interview and I say, now it's time to wind down it. And then, so
we'll see. We'll see.
So we'll see how it goes. Any speed is fine. The point is it good? So can you suggest a Chinese word of the day for the episode? What captures the spirit or an important aspect of the book?
I was very close to choosing the word for father because, again, I find that family relationship to be so important. And the way both Chaoyang and Pu Pu care so much about their dad, but aren't able to get that love back for different reasons. But then I was like, that character's so simple. Maybe that was already chosen in a past episode. So I went for a completely different word. This word is jiao ao. So jiao and ao both kind of mean pride, and together they mean pride. And the reason why I chose it is because earning his father's pride is Chaoyang's kind of main motivation for trying to get back at little Jingjing and trying to, I don't know, just certain things that he does. He's just really motivated by showing his dad how awesome he is, even though like he would really be better off. He'd be healthier if he could just not think about his dad at all. That would be the best possible thing. The word actually doesn't come up as much in the English. I think the word only shows up once, whereas in the Chinese it comes up 3 or 4 times. But I still hope that when you read it, you still get that sense that Chaoyang is just desperate for his dad to notice him even, and maybe to appreciate that he's best in his class, that he's darn clever, and he doesn't get that. And that's part of the reason why it's a tragedy. Like he's an interesting person, and he'd be so much better off if he could just have that little bit of support.
Yeah, and I don't know what the Mandarin for approval is, but I feel like that's another thing you always hear people, often boys or men, want from their dads is the approval. But yeah,
Sure.
you're right. It's clearly killing him, and it's not literally the only thing you can say that's nice about it. The only thing that his dad has got going for him is that the biological fact that he's his dad. Otherwise, he just really sucks. On the money, he occasionally throws some money, but that's not consistent or fairly done. But yeah, it kind of there's a scene. I don't know if we introduced Jing Jing. Jing Jing is his child through his new marriage, and there's I don't think this is a huge spoiler because it's quite early. There's a real wince in sympathy scene where Chaoyang has shown up at his dad's office. Jing Jing doesn't know that her dad has a son.
She's 9 years old. Can I just put that in there? She's 9. She's old enough to know.
Right. But she should know, right? But she doesn't. Yes, she hasn't been told wrongly. And their dad sort of tries to get himself out of the situation and explaining who this kid is by saying, oh yeah, what does he say? Like, that's my nephew.
Chaoyang is Mr. Fang's nephew.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, not even his own nephew.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a killer. And then it's a real downer.
It's a heart-wrenching moment. Yeah. Like he won't even own up to, like, she can handle it. And why are you so easily persuaded by Wang Yao? Why will you do anything she says? She's definitely cray-cray. But again, cray-cray in a believable way. So that's why I chose that word. It was a tough one. This time I struggled, but I hope you think it's a good one.
I think it is, yeah. And you could probably point to other stuff characters do where they feel like they need their dignity, or they need to repair their pride or their dignity, or they want something to feel good about, proud of, even if it's just having a friend.
Yeah, Zhang Dongsheng as well. You're right. Because it's always his in-laws that treat him like dirt because he's a country boy. So there's a certain sense of pride of, I've scraped by, I've used a lot of graft to get here in this slightly bigger city and to get myself a steady job. But because it's not a high-flying, super well-paid job, it's still not enough. And his pride is hurt, and that's part of the reason why he's doing some of the things that he's doing. Yeah.
Yeah. There you go. My next question, it's listeners, if you've been listening for more than one episode, you'll know what it is. If you could pair Bad Kids with a piece of music, what would it be? And I can see what you've picked. We have both picked Chinese language songs, so that's fun. I usually pick something Western. I usually pick some like Western pop, rock, or electronic, so modern genre, and then my guest picks something Chinese or classical music.
Yeah,
that I have no
hundreds
clue
of
about.
years old.
And or like modern avant-garde stuff, and they crush me. But I feel like the vibes are similar in these choices. So what's your choice?
So I had to pick this one because this is the exact song that I cut out.
轻松的样子，微笑着说回去吧，转身泪湿眼底。多想和从前一样，牵你温暖手掌，可是你不在我身旁，托清风捎去安康。时光慢些吧，不要再让你变老了，我愿用我一切换你岁月长流。
It's actually, you can find it on YouTube, and there is maybe a segment of the readership who would have gotten it or taken the time to look up the song. And it's mentioned twice, not just the one time in the book. So I do feel a little bit bad for cutting it out. And so now, reader, if you read the book, you can at least appreciate the vibe of this song and the way the singer is just so sad that his dad doesn't recognize him for who he is, that his dad isn't really there for him.
And it's Fuchin Father by the Chopstick Brothers.
Quite a 兄弟. They make short movies, and then they made this music video, I guess.
This one's a total blast from the past for me, because when I was in my first year out there in China, 2014 to 15, their Xiao Pingguo, Little Apple, was all the rage. And I haven't heard that one in years, so I probably need to
go back,
check out Fuchin, but also Xiao Pingguo, because I know the chorus is in my brain, but I would need to hear it again to reactivate the little apple in my brain. I think I went in like, this song is kind of lame, and then by the end of that year I would, I'd yell it at the club.
Crave it. So what did you pick, Angus?
I picked a song that has an English name, a short English name, and a much longer Chinese name, so I'll just be lazy and read the English name. Stable Life, Suffer Exams by, I believe it's Lao Wang Yue Dui. I almost said Yue Di, but then I opened up Google Translate and read the pinyin.
孩子们背着沉重的书包，孩子们背着沉重的背包，孩子们背着沉默的烦恼，重复的日子该怎么逃跑？
So I think this band had a EP, or possibly just a single, like just a couple, 2 or 3 tracks that all seem to be about sort of kids, teen or preteen even, like suffering. I think it's mostly in relation to school, like the sort of hardcore regime. I think this is a Taiwanese band because they're using traditional characters, but the whole Chinese/East Asian like exam cram national exams regime. I believe they've got a track whose English name is something like national exams. Oh no, cram schools killed the kids or something. So not killed, but like that's the theme.
Yeah, no, it's true though. It's so intense.
Yeah. I mean, I thought high school was pretty intense. I wouldn't put it all down to exams, but like even as a pampered Westerner, like the whole school regime kind of sucks, even though it's a structure. This thing your adult life doesn't give you automatically. But yeah, I have a translation. I'll be at a Google translation of the lyrics in front of me, but I'll do what I usually do. I'll just read them. So it starts off saying, children carry heavy backpacks, repeats that a few times. Children carry silent worries. The children are carrying heavy backpacks. The children are carrying the silent troubles. How to escape the repetitive days, the same daily troubles. The signal of freedom is not received in the classroom. Working hard only for the teacher to laugh. The name of the classmate next door, I have long forgotten. Young students formatted can't. This is not a good translation here. Young students formatted can't think about. The road ahead, study hard and continue to take the test to have a stable life. What a beautiful 3-year and 5-year college entrance examination. And then the same again. So it's not about murder, it's just about studying for your exams. But I feel like some of the, especially if you have to listen to the music, some of the vibe of the shit end of the stick when it comes to being a kid, going through the motions that kids have to go through, I think is there in that song.
Oh my God, that reminds me. There's something else I really wanted to read.
Oh, you better.
It's short. Adults only listen to one side of the story. Usually it's the girl's side. They're so stupid. Chaoyang exhaled sharply. Adults think that children are simple and that their lies are easily uncovered. They have no idea how wicked some kids can be. And that's exactly it. It's that feeling of, oh, I'm a kid and I can't do anything right now. When I finally grow up, I will, ...
Yeah.
that sense of powerlessness, or, sense of, oh, this is taking up my life and anything else would be so much better. Yeah.
I can remember a lot of the grievances I had as a kid, or especially as a teenager. And the funny thing is, looking back on them, some of them I'm like, yeah, I was wrong to be upset about that. Or it was understandable as a kid, I would get fixated on blah, blah, stupid thing, or fixate on something and then respond to it the wrong way. But then there's other things where like my grievances were quite legitimate. Like both my mum and my dad, who I was being ferried between as divorced parents, tended to get me barely on time or late for stuff. And I felt quite aggravated about that. And I think later in life thought maybe I was just being too demanding. And I should, it's perfectly fine to show up just in time for something, or 30 seconds or 1 minute or 2 minutes or 5 minutes late. But then with an adult perspective, seeing, knowing that it's not the hardest thing in the world to manage your timekeeping like that. I'm like, oh yeah, I was right to be a bit upset about that. But as a kid, I'm powerless because I can't drive myself to the swimming club 3 miles down the road. And I didn't even necessarily want to be at a swimming club 3 miles down the road, but you're a little tiny little person. So what can you do?
So true. And that's another thing where I just find the book really relatable, and maybe relatable slightly to a younger audience, but I just certainly remember being 13 and getting frustrated about things. So I think it works for an older audience as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I would give this to a teenager. I'm not sure if I'd pass it to a 12-year-old. They might not know what they're getting into.
No, they need to be probably over 15. You're right.
Yeah. Maybe if they're I know they're not going to be traumatized, but I would want to know first, I guess.
That's the trouble. And, it's the interesting thing about how we have a system for movies, but we don't really have a system for books. So you can accidentally stumble upon something that's really not the right thing for your age level if you're not like getting books that are like specifically handpicked for you.
Yeah, but conversely, the split between a young adult book and an adult book in the bookshop is usually not very fluid. Some books will work as both, and maybe like some
Good
simple
point.
adult books are easily readable. But like, I feel like maybe it's because Hollywood movies are so infantilizing. There's loads of adult movies that are easy viewing for young people.
Anybody.
Or perhaps it's a movie that is trying to get a release globally. It wants to make money in countries that are a bit more conservative or restrictive, so it's not going to put in all the shocking content because it's going for the lowest common denominator, which might make it more kid friendly. Whereas I don't know, the lowest common denominator for a book is a much harder thing.
Yeah, in a good way, I guess.
One of my best reading experiences as a preteen was the Da Vinci Code, because that was at my reading level, and it was something very different from children's books I'd read. It was more adult. If you know the book inside out, you might know the bits I mean. But of course, when I mentioned it to certain adults in my family who have certain ideas about what's good literature and what isn't, they weren't impressed. And again, looking back on that as a kid, I was right to be disappointed about that, because I was trying to tell someone I cared about I read an adult book, and I got sneered at.
Wow.
Yeah. Did I mention I have a chip on my shoulder?
And that's why you like Chaoyang.
Yeah. Chaoyang mindset. Yeah. Okay, I'll take us to the bonus question now before it becomes a gripe session for me. So, listeners, if you're listening to the standard episode, you will hear garbled noise here, or reversed, sped up audio of me and Michelle talking. If you want to hear the answer and conversation around this question, it will go up not immediately, but at some point to the show's Patreon, along with all the other bonus questions and lots of other bonus episodes, what I have done on interesting books. There is a bonus episode on Bad Kids, which is me talking about this book, I don't know, for 20 to 40 minutes, long before this interview. So it's all up there. I think that Bad Kids one is live already. Anyway, the bonus question for you, Michelle, is this. Do you think publishers, English language publishers that is, know how to sell books in translation like Bad Kids? I asked that because, to me, just aesthetically, this is a really, I mean, I know you don't like the red, but to my brain, this is a very nice looking and also commercially friendly looking book. I love it, actually. Okay, I'll close off the bonus question there. On to the final two questions. Oh, and by the way, all of you guys not subscribed to the Patreon, that was the best bonus question ever, and you're missing out. Really.
It's one of the last 10 bonus questions you're going to get before hiatus, folks.
Yeah, the clock's ticking.
Oh, I'm so honored to be one of the last 10. So honored.
I may have said this on the show. I would like one of them, maybe number 99, to be a drinking game episode. I just need to find the biggest alcoholic in CTE.
Yeah, we can work on that. I can figure out something for that.
I suspect. No, I won't name names. I have some guesses, but a former guest on the show suggested I do that for Mo Yan's Republic of Wine, Jiu Guo.
Oh,
a fat book.
Okay.
But
I
would do it if it would secure the guest. Anyway, yes, further reading questions. If listeners want more like Bad Kids, obviously they should go get The Untouched Crime. But beyond that, where would you direct?
Well, since I went to Leeds, I met someone who is actually researching Chinese crime fiction. And so thank you to her for recommending these books to me. I finished The Golden Hairpin by Qinghan Cixi, I assume, recently. And that is crime fiction, takes place in China, is translated from Chinese into English. I had a good time, really loved it. The only thing that makes it very, very different from Bad Kids is that it takes place in Imperial China. And our main detective is female. There's actually a lot more female characters. But it's a fun one, and it's pacey in the way that I want it to be pacey. And there's a lot of characters going on instead of like a zoomed in focus on just 3 or 4 people. And I've also started a book called Murder in Dragon City by Qingming. This is translated by Alex Woodend, and actually Alex Woodend also translated The Golden Hairpin, which is interesting because actually they're quite different. Mm-hmm. Murder in Dragon City takes place in present day. And it's in a fake city. Disappointing. But otherwise, I find the storytelling to be very good. And it's modern day, all these forensic people trying to work out what is going on here and who is the criminal. So a very good match as far as I can tell, because I'm just on chapter 6 at the moment. But yes, guys, get both. They're really easy to get because they're on Amazon and Kindle as well. So super fun to just have ready to go when you're waiting around in some waiting room, or you're taking a flight, taking a train. I would recommend both.
So you're telling me there is no Dragon City, and that is not like the capital of China is not Dragon City?
If I am wrong about this, guys, please help me. I've been studying Chinese for too long to not be aware of Dragon City.
I'm just messing with you. But yeah, I noticed.
Well, we'll go together. We'll go on a holiday together if it
Dragon
exists.
Province, Dragon Minority Autonomous Prefecture.
Region. Excellent.
Yeah. They're making all the dragons learn Mandarin, actually. It's sad. Moving on. Actually, no, not moving on. Another thing I noticed about both these books, as well as being translated by Alex Woodend. Do you know what else they have in common?
What else?
They're both Amazon Crossing publications.
Oh, interesting. See, some publishers are doing well, but that's all I'm going to say.
Yeah.
Go get the Patreon, guys.
Yeah. And thank you, Bezos Corp, for whatever reason serving translated Chinese genre fiction, especially. Amazon Crossing has some good stuff. There's one of theirs. I don't think I'm going to be able to do it before I hit episode 100, but it's one of my favorite ones I've read from translated Chinese lit. It's called The Child's Past Life. I think they really blew it because the Chinese title is much cooler. It's Sheng Si He, so it should be called River of Life and Death, but they called it The Child's Past Life.
Oh, I wonder if there was already a book with that name.
Maybe. That one I loved. It's like a blend of supernatural, crime, and revenge. But yeah, that's a great one. Anyway, for further reading tips, I've got one for listeners. Go to truetraffic.com, the show homepage, and I've forgotten exactly how one navigates to a tag, but I'm pretty sure I've got like a crime. Yeah, if you go into select category right there on the main screen, there is oh yeah, there right there at the top, all crime episodes. You can find every episode I've done on crime books, and there's all sorts of crimey goodness there. So
Genius. Yeah.
Okay, final question for you, Michelle. And last guest I asked this said, what did she say? She said she said something to the
Things after they happen rather than before they get secured.
you announced the birth, not the pregnancy. That's what she said. So she didn't disclose, but so don't feel obliged to answer. But what are you working on just now?
Yeah, more shorter stuff at the moment. I am really, really enjoying the teaching right now. So sometimes I just get excited about a little text that I want my students to translate with me, or I'm trying to create right now a speech about electric vehicles because that's so big in China right now. Literary wise, we're in wait and see mode. But I'm generally, compared to other translators, I'm generally a wait and see kind of translator. So when someone comes up to me and says, "What about this book?" I take a good look at it and decide then, rather than reading, falling in love with a book, and then having my heart broken because the book can't be done or there's no money for it for whatever reason.
Sensible.
So we'll see what comes my way, you know. I'm open for business, everybody. If you got something that's good, let me know.
Take heed. Everyone take heed. Okay, I think I'll wind it up there. Unless, is there anything we've missed you'd like to get into listeners' eardrums?
Listeners, you are amazing. Thank you so much, Angus, for having me. I think we've covered everything.
Yeah, I don't say that enough. Listeners, you are great. Even if you don't subscribe on Patreon, you're still awesome.
Yes, you are.
Amen to that.
Okay, we've come to the end of the show. Tragic, I know. I don't think I'll need to plug the Patreon. There was plenty of plugs in the interview. I could plug the social media, but the links are all literally in the show notes, so I'll skip that. Instead, I want to say we are getting quite near the end of the whole series now. Not long till we get to episode, well, quite long, but not that long until we get to episode 100, at which point I will be taking a great big break to do other things in my life that I've been meaning to get around to. So if there's anything you're desperate to hear before we hit the 100th episode, now's the time to tell me. If there's any message you'd like to pass on to the show, please do let me know. I doubt I'm going to get enough to do anything interesting with them, but who knows. I suppose, last of all, if you've been thinking for a long time that you'd like to be a guest on the show, then really you need to tell me now, because I've already got the next 3 or 4 odd interviews lined up. So which means, listeners, that should be good for you guys. That should mean I'm able to keep these rolling out fairly regularly. Hopefully we won't have too many big gaps between episodes for the next few, although, touch wood, maybe there will be. But yeah, we've got some good ones lined up. I'm hoping to do something a bit different for the last few episodes. I think you heard me talking to Michelle about maybe doing a boozy episode. Unless I cut that out, I don't remember. But yeah, do get in touch with anything you want to get in there before the show goes on hiatus, basically. I will just end things there, and of course tell you the very best thing you can do with the show, do for the show, is tell your friends, tell your family, tell your school teachers, tell the guy blackmailing you because you own a piece of footage that shows him doing something awful. If you tell him, it might distract him long enough for you to pull out your pocket knife and gut him. And on that charming image, I will leave you and say Zijin.